There are groups saying that ALLATRA is no longer the same, that ALLATRA is no longer heading in the right direction. So what's the truth? Who is a true participant of ALLATRA?
In reality, these groups of people saying such things have absolutely nothing to do with ALLATRA, even though, at first glance, some of them might seem to have been with us for a long time. Let me explain why. 10 years ago, not all participants fully realized the seriousness of the climate situation. And not everyone grasped what the ALLATRA scientists were actually talking about. Everything outside the window seemed fine. So there were many doubts not only among the general public, but even among the participants themselves. As a result, many participants had different priorities, different interests. That's why other projects developed, whether it was blogging videos or various other topics. However, the core of ALLATRA has always focused on climate issues, and ultimately every project that was undertaken, in one way or another, led back to climate.
Well, yes, because we needed to raise awareness about the seriousness of climate change at a time when it wasn't as obvious. It wasn't happening right outside our windows yet. That's why we used practically every possible way to draw attention to this problem. But today, the situation is completely different because everything we talked about before is now being confirmed every single day. And it's plain to see.
It's also important to mention that there are different people in ALLATRA, meaning from all backgrounds, different religions, different cultures, and different walks of life. And there are also people who focus on self-development and practice different self-control techniques, like the autogenic training, which was described by the German psychiatrist Schultz. That's actually great and completely reasonable, because it helps people organize their thoughts and manage their inner state, both in everyday life and especially in extreme situations, like climate disasters. The ability to control oneself and manage one's thoughts can literally be life-saving. In a critical moment, instead of panicking, a person remains calm, which allows them to act appropriately, not just to protect themselves, but also to help and even save others. However, it's essential to emphasize that these are purely psychological and personal practices. They have nothing to do with a person's religious beliefs. That is entirely up to each individual. ALLATRA, as an organization, is outside of religion and has never encouraged anyone to change their religious views. On the contrary, ALLATRA upholds freedom and democracy, including religious freedom or any other kind.
And within this freedom and democracy, everyone had the opportunity to explore topics that interested them, whether it was social issues or technological advancements in our society. And similarly, since there were representatives from various religious groups, there were people who wanted to study the history of religion and explore what religion says about the climate, and whether there is any information on this topic at all. So, they delved into this research because they had specific questions they wanted to explore. And when they found something, a conference was organized to discuss it. But the problem is, those conferences were misunderstood. Anti-cultists started twisting it, suggesting that we were somehow trying to create an alternative. But an alternative to what? To Christianity? To Islam? Then suddenly claims started popping up that we were forming some kind of cult. But come on, we live in a free world. Why is it a problem to ask questions? If we see that Jesus said one thing, but people in the world behave differently, we think it's our right to ask these questions and figure out where something might have gone wrong. There is no contradiction in that. A person has the right to make sense of the world and understand how it works.
And here's something worth mentioning. After the persecution of ALLATRA participants started, we agreed on the international level that we would no longer engage in religious issues because religion has never been our focus, and it still isn't. ALLATRA has always united people with different views. from all kinds of religious backgrounds, and even atheists. And what unites us is not some ideologies. What unites us is the effort to understand reality and to address the challenges humanity is facing right now. That's the meaning and essence of ALLATRA's activities. The most important issue, of course, is the climate crisis. Because if we don't start working on real solutions that can mitigate the effects of climate change, it will affect absolutely everyone. No exceptions. And it doesn't matter what religion people follow. Climate doesn't ask. We can already see it with our own eyes. Climate doesn't distinguish between people and their beliefs. We are already witnessing extreme weather swings. We see natural disasters and increasing migration, which is affecting the whole world. So that's the point. The climate. It is an issue that affects every one of us, every single person, and that's what ALLATRA is all about. It's about getting past our differences, our opinions, and focusing on finding a solution to climate progression together.
Simply put, ALLATRA's goal is to help ensure the preservation of life on this planet.
Exactly. I'd just like to add that in ALLATRA, we've always said, follow the laws of your country. ALLATRA participants are law-abiding citizens, true patriots of their nations. All activities and initiatives carried out within ALLATRA strictly comply with legal frameworks. ALLATRA has never broken a single law. I also want to set the record straight on politics and say it again loud and clear. ALLATRA stays out of politics because our focus is the climate. We inform people about climate change and the threats it poses to humanity, urging immediate action to address this crisis. We have never been involved in politics, let alone espionage. Yet intelligence agencies from all over the world have checked us out. We are the most thoroughly vetted organization in the world. But we've never been concerned about this because we have nothing to hide. Everything we do is out in the open, totally transparent. However, when the second phase of genocide against us began, when our rights were being denied, when people were being fired from their jobs, threatened with physical violence, dehumanized, tortured, and silenced, naturally we had to respond. So we began speaking out about this criminal terrorist organization, Ratseers, which is behind these attacks. This organization strips people of their rights, excludes them from society, labels them with the yellow star of David, persecutes, tortures, and even driving some to the point of physical elimination. So tell me, how's a person supposed to stay silent in a situation like that? We simply stood up for our rights, for the protection of our rights, because we understand that no one else will do it for us. And it's not just about our rights. We stood up for the rights of all people on this planet.
That's true. And here's something really interesting. The moment we started standing up for our rights, for democracy, and for people's freedom in general, that's when these groups we've been talking about became highly active. You know, the ones claiming ALLATRA's gone off the rails, that its participants do evil, or even serve Satan. However, such an effect didn't just happen out of nowhere. It's the result of the work of Dworkin's agents, people whose minds have been brainwashed with Nazi ideology and who in turn have infected others with this ideology. As a consequence, groups have emerged that work to dismantle organizations from inside, and we can see this happening with ALLATRA as well. This led to the formation of separate groups that have taken on a certain religious undertone, even falling into fanaticism. But let me be clear again, these groups have nothing to do with ALLATRA. Yes, some of the people who were once close to ALLATRA, and who we know personally, ended up in these splinter groups. But now they have established their own separate communities outside of ALLATRA. They've got every right to do that, of course. The sad part, though, is they're actively obstructing efforts aimed at securing a better future for all. And on top of that, they're publicly spreading slander against ALLATRA participants through their statements. I just want to emphasize that ALLATRA is still heading in the same direction it always has. There's been no deviation. Now, let's take a look at the very guide that was used to create these groups. In 2001, Dworkin organized a conference called Totalitarian Sects, the Threat of the 21st Century. One of the speakers was Smirnov, who represents the Russian Orthodox Church. You can find a record of what he said there in a Russian psychiatric journal. And I'd like to read an excerpt from it now. During the conference, Smirnov stated, "It is necessary to create organizations where there's sports, a bit of intrigue. Then we can send these youth as infiltrators into cults to dig up addresses, names, and photos. They'd build their own networks inside, allowing these cults to be dismantled from the inside." So during this conference, Smirnov basically laid out a step-by-step guide on how to destroy undesirable organizations. And it doesn't matter if it's a secular organization like ours or a religious one.
Just think about it. It's actually a brilliant plan because in this way, Dworkin can take down any group he dislikes. If such a group is infiltrated by someone like this, an adept or recruit of this kind, people will naturally start gravitating toward him because they find it appealing in some way. They fall for that manipulation. Then it gets incredibly easy to point a finger at that group and begin to study it. All it takes is bringing in some so-called expert, a religious scholar, and then based on what this little splinter group is saying or doing, they start labeling the entire organization as a cult or some kind of apocalyptic movement, basically whatever it takes to discredit such a group. But excuse me, what does this have to do with us? That's not our activity. That's not our misunderstanding. It's just a decision made by a group of people who chose to do something on their own and follow their own path. They've got every right to do that, and we respect it. But it's got absolutely nothing to do with us. These people do not take part in ALLATRA's projects anyway. They don't join in on what we're doing.
We can look at it even simpler. Just check out our official website. Our mission is clearly stated there, which is to study climate crisis and geodynamic issues, to initiate discussions on these topics, and to help address this truly global problem. All our activities are carried out by volunteers. This means that no one is forced to do anything. That's a fundamental point. An ALLATRA volunteer is someone who is committed to protecting life. There's no such thing as a formal registration to join a project or an official declaration for leaving the project. It's way easier than that. If you want to participate, you do. If you don't, you simply don't. That's it. And those who go around smearing and slandering people behind their backs, just like the anti-cultists, clearly, for some reason, have failed to understand what selfless cooperation and voluntarism truly mean. They're probably wired to think everything should be done their way, meeting their requirements and insisting that things go exactly as they want. But we are volunteers here. There are no salaries, no bonuses or rewards. ALLATRA doesn't own any assets, and obedience is never forced, because ALLATRA is, first and foremost, about freedom.
So, to sum it up, ALLATRA has never been a closed organization with any hierarchy or mandatory membership. Anyone could join at any time and leave at any time. And when someone says that ALLATRA is no longer what it used to be, what do they even mean by that? Especially when it's coming from people who have never been involved in ALLATRA projects. And what about those who have been in ALLATRA for over 10 years and are still doing the same thing, focusing on climate issues? There are so many of them, Dushan and many others, everyone who speaks out. Are they clueless about what they've been working on all these years? And yet, those who have never been involved are the ones saying ALLATRA is going off track? Come on, what kind of nonsense is that? The truth is, nothing has changed in ALLATRA, and the proof of that is precisely the people who've been engaged in the same work for over 10 years, studying the climate. And just one more thing about freedom. Every person who wants to proactively participate in the movement's activities, they do so at their own discretion and according to their own abilities, contributing to the work that ALLATRA is engaged in. That's the whole point. So, if you resonate with ALLATRA's work, you take part in it. And if you don't, that's totally fine. Go and do something else. It's really that simple.
So if you don't align with the activities and goals of ALLATRA, then go your own way, establish your own organization, set your own rules, and enforce them as you see fit. If you wish to engage in religion, then create your own church, but leave ALLATRA out of it.
Exactly, because we are focused on climate. That's what it is, what it's always been, and what it'll keep being. As we've already mentioned, whether it was conferences or various activities within ALLATRA, the central pillar, the main focus, has always been climate. And if today, someone is publicly attacking us, twisting things, and claiming that ALLATRA has changed, who are they actually serving? Is this just happening by accident? No way. This is a coordinated process, and this coordinated process naturally serves the interests of the anti-cultists. That's the whole point. After all, these are their methods. If they can't break an organization or a group from the outside, they try to tear it apart from the inside, to sow division. They infiltrate as supposed friends and start conflicts, plant doubts within the group. It's their tried and true practice, and we know exactly where they got these methods from. We know their origins, and there have been many roundtable discussions analyzing this, and anyone can look it up. Those who are publicly attacking us and spreading the narrative that ALLATRA has changed are doing nothing more but supporting the anti-cult agenda. They are backing the brutal persecution going on in Russia, and the anti-cultists are working to spread it to other countries. They are actively supporting the very genocide that these anti-cultists are instigating.
I've got something to add here. Within these very groups we're talking about, we see comments claiming that what is happening to former participants in Russia, the persecution, the unjust imprisonment, is their own fault. Some even go as far as to write that a person can just die, because it's only a body anyway. If someone is capable of wishing such things on another person, of wishing them death and even publicly stating it, then forgive me, but what is that if not supporting genocide?
Speaking of Russia, it would be good to clarify for our viewers why the persecution against us began 10 years ago. You may be surprised, but the reason actually ties back to climate. Back in 2014, ALLATRA published a climate report that had a public part and a confidential section. The confidential part, which was not accessible to the general public, was something that ALLATRA participants tried to deliver to certain key figures in Russia. You may be wondering, what exactly was in there? What was it about? It addressed a looming threat beneath Siberia, a mantle plume and the risk of it breaking through the Earth's crust. Yet, of course, these individuals weren't scared about losing their own lives, nor were they concerned about the potential loss of life among the local population. Instead, they feared losing their territories, their wealth, and their power. So they chose to do nothing and remain silent. And to make sure that we wouldn't reveal this information to anyone, they decided to silence us as well. Ratzirs, under the leadership of Dvorkin, issued an order through his network of agents to brutally persecute and torture ALLATRA participants involved in climate research.
So, on one hand, we are facing persecution, and on the other, we are being accused by society of supposedly being against CO2. But we are not against CO2. we see it's going up. In fact, we have even taken that anthropogenic factor and expanded it with another huge factor: ocean pollution. Because this pollution is causing the ocean to lose its cooling function. The ocean acts like a massive air conditioning system that regulates the planet's weather. And this pollution is actually one of the reasons why we are now witnessing so many extreme weather events. Today, many are already talking about nanoplastics, microplastics, and about this issue too. But we were talking about this years ago.
And now, just consider the absurdity of this situation when we take it even further, because it also concerns the very climate models themselves. There are scientists who calculate and develop climate models to predict and forecast how the climate will evolve. When ALLATRA scientists presented their climate model 10 years ago, they were ridiculed by some others. They were told it was too unrealistic, that such scenarios might happen in 200 or 300 years. But today, as conventional climate models fail, because what is happening around the world every single day in terms of climate is far outpacing what scientists had predicted, the climate situation is progressing much faster than expected. And at this moment, the mathematical climate model developed by ALLATRA scientists is the only one that is actually working. ALLATRA scientists are not surprised, just as ALLATRA volunteers are not surprised. What is shocking, however, is that those who labeled us as a cult have ensured that people don't listen to us, that a solution, which is actually very simple, is not heard.
We can say that the task of ALLATRA scientists, which was to study the climate situation, identify its true causes, create a mathematical model, and find a solution to the problem, was accomplished brilliantly. And the task of ALLATRA volunteers, that is, our task, is to spread this information further in order to solve the situation.
And we regret that this is not good news, because we know that what we have warned about will continue to unfold. We know what lies ahead, and we know that things will get worse. That's why it is crucial to be aware of this and to share this information with others. After all, if a person is ill, they need to know their diagnosis, so that a doctor can prescribe an effective treatment. And right now, with the climate situation, we are at a point where it will no longer resolve itself. We need to take action.
I just want to briefly add, pardon me, that if it hadn't been for racers back then, and if humanity had actually heard what ALLATRA scientists had discovered, we wouldn't have been in the climate situation we are in today. After all, we came bearing a gift for humanity, the gift of truth, but because some individuals put their own personal Nazi-driven interests first, we have now, unfortunately, become messengers of unpleasant news.
This goes hand in hand because they twist and distort everything against us, portraying us as somehow apocalyptic. However, it is crucial to emphasize that, in addition to starting to draw attention to a major issue, ALLATRA has also come up with an effective solution.
Right.
This part B, that there is a solution, a relatively simple and effective one, is something we've been saying from the very beginning. However, certain individuals deliberately conceal this part, just to create a specific image of us.
Exactly. That's the point. As was already mentioned about racers, they started to dehumanize us simply because we are drawing attention to an imminent problem, instead of focusing on solutions. That's the point. Because yes, on one hand, ALLATRA scientists identified the causes of climate progression, presented the model, and showed where we are heading. But they also came up with concrete solutions. And there are many solutions. These have been thoroughly analyzed at conferences and in various materials published by ALLATRA. Dr. Egon Chalakian speaks about these solutions, and in essence, they can be divided into two key areas. The first key area is degassing, which means removing excess gases from the Earth's crust. This is a real, functional method that can already help today. And it can actually prevent the worst natural disasters, whether it's earthquakes, eruptions, and so on. And this is not just theoretical but practical, because such technologies are already starting to be implemented. Dr. Egon Cholakian is an expert in the topic of degassing, and in his public speeches, he talks about it extensively. He possesses invaluable knowledge that the global scientific community could apply in practice, if only there were an international scientific dialogue. But unfortunately, due to the work of anti-cultists, such a dialogue does not exist. As for specific practical examples of degassing, we can look at Iceland, where gas release is continuously monitored due to the region's strong volcanic activity, and of course, Japan, which has high seismic activity. So we can see that in different parts of the world, degassing is already being looked at in some way. Now, the second key area is atmospheric water generators. This is a technology that can restore the water cycle on the planet while also helping to stabilize the atmosphere. There are already concrete technologies and specific companies dedicated to this. For example, the Israeli company Watergen, the Spanish company Aquair, and the US company SkyH2O. These companies are not just working on this at a theoretical level. They actually have functional devices available. But what we need today is for the public and the global community to be aware that such technologies exist and that they can actually help solve the issue of ocean pollution. Because the ocean is a key factor. It covers 71% of the Earth's surface. So it's obvious that if we want to stabilize the situation and restore balance to the processes happening on our planet, we must focus on the ocean, which occupies such a vast part of the Earth.
Well, like you said, we have the technological capabilities. Humanity has got everything it needs to handle the climate situation. But now, the real question is beginning to emerge. Will we, as people, as humanity as a whole, be able to take the necessary step, make the decision, and start taking action? Because honestly, when we look at the current situation and the way things are unfolding, whether from a geopolitical or macroeconomic perspective, we realize that at this moment, all we can really do in our work and our efforts to inform people is to hope that someone with real decision-making power, who can really contribute to the solution, will hear us. All we can do is hope this will be someone competent, someone who understands that this issue directly affects their own life, the lives of their children, their family, someone who will find the courage to start taking the necessary steps.
Someone who actually wants to solve it.
Someone who wants to solve it themselves. Yes. And I'd also like to add something in terms of geopolitics, since it's come up already. Climate is basically forcing us, as humanity, to reassess certain things. It's pushing us to address these issues together, and these are really specific matters. We could go into great depth, but for now, let's just take that Siberian plume we mentioned earlier. If we want to carry out a specific intervention, such as degassing, it requires the involvement of a top-tier scientific team, a global team of scientists, and to make that happen, they would need the right conditions. They need to be able to collaborate. And that is the challenge.
And those are obviously geopolitical and macroeconomic questions.
Exactly. Right now, it might even be mostly a geopolitical question. Everything is interconnected. These are all magmatic processes happening under our feet, and they are part of a single, unified planetary system. So, what is happening beneath Siberia is directly linked to what is happening beneath Campi Flegrei in Italy and under the Mariana Trench
in Greece.
Right. And what is happening under Yellowstone in the US too? The truth is, we are incredibly interconnected. That's why any solution must come from that perspective of interconnection. We've been pointing this out for a long time, both to the general public and to experts. We can go talk to specialists, visit various institutions, and reach out to politicians, but we ourselves do not have the authority to make decisions. We are not competent in politics. So the real changes that humanity needs to make are waiting for someone who will actually hear us.
And on top of that, thinking that we could actually change something ourselves is quite naive. What could we possibly change when we've been banned in Russia? A year and a half ago, ALLATRA was officially declared an undesirable organization in Russia. And in reality, that means our scientists haven't had access to scientific data for the past year and a half. And this means we have virtually no information about what is truly happening with the mantle plume beneath Siberia. This makes any kind of forecasting incredibly difficult. But if we look at it from another perspective, ordinary people living there can see the changes firsthand. Snow is melting from below. There's hot water in wells. Extreme weather patterns that used to be rare are now becoming the norm, and people are talking about it on social media. And how do Russian experts and institutions respond? Focus on raising your children and don't think about such nonsense.
Everything's fine. Nothing's happening.
Is that an adequate response from the scientific community? So if we look at it from this angle, we focus on climate issues, and in return, we get labeled as a cult by Dvorkin's organized group, set up to dehumanize us to make sure you don't hear us. So this, in essence, poses a direct threat to you as well.
Here's the point. What's happening in Siberia is already undeniable. There are so many warning signs, so much happening there, that it can no longer be ignored. If Russia allowed our participants to speak about it, the arguments would be absolutely clear. No one would have any doubts left, and they know that. So, when it's no longer possible to refute the facts with arguments, the only option left is to silence those who are telling the truth. And that's exactly what happened. Race seers launched the persecution precisely because they've had a clear game plan for 2 decades, and they are implementing it. Their plan's pretty straightforward. To build their global totalitarian system, not just in Russia, but all over the world. Because in Russia, everything is going according to their plan. They've basically set up this theocratic regime there, merging religion and politics into a single center of power. They twist the Constitution as they please, do whatever they want, and now they are trying to spread this model worldwide. So after 2 decades of their work, they continue following their long-term agenda, and suddenly, ALLATRA participants come along. They present a climate report, show what is happening in Siberia, piece together all the arguments, analyze all the data, and say, sorry guys, we hate to break it to you, but you're sitting on a powder keg here. That's Siberian plume. Tough luck. Your plans will not be realized. So what do they do in response? They are trying to silence us because they want to continue what they've already started. They want to build their Fourth Reich. It's that simple. And here's another piece of it. If the people in Russia learn the truth, they will obviously start leaving the territory. People will flee, either toward Ukraine or anywhere else, just as far away from Siberia as possible. Why? Because based on basic calculations, it is clear that if the Siberian plume really explodes, it will destroy 70% of the territory, and this won't be a long-term process. That explosion would be like a nuclear detonation. It would instantly wipe out the entire region.
And this withdrawal from Siberia is quite telling, because it's pretty well known that Russia had been working on this ambitious development plan for the whole Siberian region. The plan was to build large, high-tech industrial cities with populations of up to 1 million people. This project was officially presented by the Russian Minister of Defense in 2021. In fact, this grand, ambitious initiative was even introduced to the president, who at a certain point approved it. Because, let's be honest, Siberia is a strategically prospective region. It's got massive mineral wealth, all kinds of resources, plus huge reserves of the planet's drinking water. This makes it a critical asset for Russia, and they had been developing this plan for over a decade.
Exactly. But then, in January 2023, the Russian government pulled a move that totally shocked and bewildered many people. They approved a new development strategy and declared that Siberia was no longer of interest to them. That region was now deemed no longer promising. Does that sound like a logical statement to you? Think about it. Siberia, the pride of Russia, the very heart of the country. As already mentioned, it holds vast reserves of natural resources. And on top of that, they had been working on this project for over a decade, investing massive amounts of money, time, and hope into it. And then, suddenly, with the snap of a finger, they decide that it's no longer important to them.
Why do you think they're pulling their investments out? They are shifting their investments and plans as far away from Siberia as they can, either toward China or to the Arctic.
Because they finally understood that what we've been saying all along is actually true. They've confirmed it for themselves and realized that it's unavoidable.
Exactly.
But how are they reacting to it?
They are responding by saving their money while leaving people to die, because they're still keeping quiet about it. They haven't told the people anything. They are protecting their own pockets, failing to realize that the consequences are going to be global anyway. Yet the people who remain there, unaware of what's coming, the authorities know full well they are basically sending them to certain death. Because if the Siberian plume breaks through the ground and erupts, the people in that region will have only minutes, at most hours, to live.
And those who have the power to make decisions, who could inform the public and ensure these people's safety, choose to remain silent. They know that if people knew, they would flee. There are even so-called experts who publicly dismiss our warnings about the massive risk. They go on TV saying it would take millions of years for the plume to become active. But have these experts noticed that it has already been 250 million years since the last devastating eruption? Does that seem like a short time to you? And if you don't believe us, verify it for yourself. You don't have to take our word for it. Check out the facts. And if you haven't done that, then it's better to keep quiet. Because if you lull people into not caring, making them think there's nothing to worry about, then you are the one taking responsibility for what's coming for those people, and for all of us, right along with them.
That said, the information about the degassing of the Siberian plume, as you mentioned, is out there. The technology exists. Everything is ready. All that's needed is for the right people to make a decision so that work in this direction can begin. Of course, there are always risks involved. But if this intervention was done in time, Russia would even gain additional territory. If we compare it to the medical situation, sure, there's always a risk before surgery. No surgeon can ever guarantee that an operation will go 100% smoothly. But we have a diagnosis, and surgery is needed. So, are we just going to wait until the patient dies?
And again, if they had listened to us 10 years ago and carried out degassing, but the anti-cultists didn't want to hear us. They had their own plans, and they made sure no one else heard us either, like we've said before. How did they do that? Through the media. That's why articles started coming out saying we're a cult, that we're dangerous, insane, and so on. So what can we say about such media? Either they've also been brainwashed by Dvorkin's Nazi ideology, or they're just in it for the money. Because if that weren't the case, they'd be able to look at things from a broader perspective. They would at least verify the information, check whether it's true, or just a pack of lies. But instead, they just blindly spread the filth that Dvorkin dictated to them without any real investigation. And the funny thing is that Dvorkin dictated this nonsense 10 years ago, and nothing's changed since then. Media outlets around the world keep copying the same nonsense, accusations and lies over and over. And now it's like something out of a bad comedy. In Russia, we're supposedly pro-Ukrainian because they have a mindset that Ukraine is bad. In Ukraine, we're supposedly pro-Russian because that's the mentality there. While in Europe and elsewhere, we're either pro-Russian or pro-American, depending on which media outlet is publishing it and what kind of readers they're targeting. There's no evidence behind any of it. It's just a bunch of emotional mess to provoke reactions in people, because to manipulate someone, you need emotions. There's absolutely nothing new about this tactic, and what's even more interesting is that all these media outlets, even internationally, start publishing these articles at the exact same time, so it's crystal clear this whole thing is a coordinated effort set in motion by Dvorkin.
And why did they label us a cult in the first place? To dehumanize us, discredit us, silence us, and make sure people don't believe us, so they never learn the truth about the climate. But here's the thing. The only group that actually fits all the criteria of a sect is Dvorkin's own. And we didn't make that up. There was talk about the clear signs of his cult-like behavior back when he started creating rat seers. Lots of media outlets reported on it, and not just once. A well-respected Russian lawyer and doctor of law, Anatoly Pshelintsev, has also expressed a similar opinion.
Even people who used to work with him have talked about it too.
Exactly. You see, it's very easy to start dehumanizing someone to make people stop listening to them. Let me explain it with a simple example. Picture a doctor and a patient. The doctor diagnoses the patient with a terrifying, serious illness, but he also offers a path to recovery, a way to get better. But here's the problem. That doctor is immediately labeled a fraud, a lunatic, an idiot. And the patient is told, "Oh, don't listen to that quack. Just live your life, you're fine. Nothing is going to happen to you." So naturally, the patient ignores the qualified doctor, listens to these other people instead, and goes home, blissfully unaware that he's dying, walking straight into his own demise like a bull to slaughter. Now look at us. We're in that doctor's position. We are diagnosing a terrifying reality. Our planet is terminally ill. What's happening now is nothing compared to what's coming. I'm talking about climate change and climate disasters. We're saying that this is a problem for all of humanity, and sooner or later it will affect you. It will affect us. It will affect everyone. That's why we're speaking up. That's why we're pushing for this issue to be addressed now. Because we want to live. We want you to live. We want our children to have a future. But instead of being heard, just like that doctor was labeled a fraud, we get labeled an apocalyptic cult.
Apocalyptic cult, or as they also call it, an apocalyptic religious movement with millennial vibes. How does that sound to you? To most people, it sounds about as appealing as spit on the sidewalk, something you'd rather steer clear. See how easy it is to trample years of someone's hard work. All it takes are 2 words. It doesn't matter how much time lots of people spent collecting data, conducting deep research, running their own analyses, and carefully developing new ideas and hypotheses based on their findings. It doesn't matter how much effort, attention, skill, and experience they poured into sharing those discoveries. It's all in vain. Picture a tall stack of papers, dense with expert articles, charts, calculations, and analyses. Then suddenly, some hired expert slaps a big red stamp on the top sheet. Apocalyptic cult. This so-called expert who's got that stamp either cares only about their wallet, or what might be even worse, is so fanatically convinced that you are the enemy and people need to be warned about you. They can't shut your mouth. So instead, they try to plug the ears of those you're trying to reach, those you're trying to share critical life-saving findings with. Your hard-earned, well-reasoned hypotheses are dismissed by this so-called expert who doesn't even bother to dig into them and calls them nonsense and disinformation. No matter how solid your conclusions are, these fake experts turn your path into a thorny, uphill battle. On top of everything else you're doing, you now have to find other ways forward and rely on the understanding of those who aren't afraid to think for themselves, people who haven't let their ears be sealed shut by the wax of fear disguised as prejudice. And we're grateful for every single one of them. There are a lot of them out there, and that is great.
And look at how absurd this situation is. Here we have the ALLATRA movement that focuses on climate change. And instead of sparking discussions with experts on the topic, inviting climatologists, volcanologists, and everyone who's got relevant knowledge, so we could all start verifying, looking for solutions, or at least adding to the conversation, we get nothing. Instead, they drag in some religious studies guy to start saying, this is an apocalyptic movement, these are cultists. What is that if not a personal attack? If you don't have any real arguments, it's better to just stay quiet. Because using emotional manipulation like this is pretty low, especially when we're trying to deal with a question this critical to life itself.
At the end of the day, it's about their asses too.
The real issue here is that science can't move forward if scientists refuse to consider all the facts, all the data, all perspectives, all the figures. It just doesn't work. If scientists only look at things from one angle while ignoring other possible causes, that's not science anymore. It's ideology. And that's what's happening today. ALLATRA scientists, who have been studying this for over 30 years, are laying out concrete data on the table, serving it up on a silver platter. It's all there for international discussion, for serious scientific work, to really work with the data and the models, and everything that's already been put together. But then the anti-cultists show up and say, oh, these are cultists, scaring people about the end of the world. You don't need to research that. And so, nobody does. That's not getting us anywhere. This isn't a science problem. It's not that the world lacks scientific potential. There are plenty of brilliant minds in the scientific community all over the world. The problem is that when ALLATRA scientists are being smeared and all their work gets instantly dismissed, there's no progress. So, it's not a science issue. It's an issue with the anti-cultists and the labels they slap on us. Because if we, as a society, accept the idea that scientific knowledge can be dismissed with a label, then we're done as a humanity. Let's be real about it. If that's the road we're heading, there is no future. That's why we need to stand firm. Truth and science are about facts, not labels.
But history teaches us that nearly every major scientific breakthrough has met resistance from both the scientific and societal establishment. And at the same time, the greater the resistance, the bigger the breakthrough that follows.
By the way, have you noticed something interesting? Everyone, including these so-called experts, completely ignores our international activities and presentations. We've presented our data, hypotheses, and proposed solutions at global UN conferences. We attended COP16 in Saudi Arabia, COP16 in Colombia, and spoke at the COP29 Climate Summit in Baku, Azerbaijan. And even more remarkably, we had a private audience with Pope Francis, where he gave us an apostolic blessing for our climate-related efforts. So, I ask you, does this sound like the work of a cult? Do shady groups get the opportunity to present their climate reports at official UN conferences? Do they receive a private audience with the Pope? This isn't just about ignoring. It's a deliberate effort to suppress our analyses and international achievements.
And since we're talking about the UN, it's interesting to note that even UN representatives, as well as various scientific communities and institutions, often describe the climate situation in much more dramatic terms than ALLATRA. I have prepared a few quotes from global figures. For example, UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres said, "This coming century may be one of humanity's last." Meanwhile, the famous naturalist David Attenborough warned, if we don't take action, the collapse of our civilizations is on the horizon. And there are many more similar statements. And it's not just UN representatives. Major publications like the New York Times, The Economist, and Time magazine all named the book The Uninhabitable Earth as one of the most significant works of 2019. In that book, the author describes how we are currently in what he calls a window of opportunity. He explains that these years, literally the last few years, are the only chance we have to address the climate crisis. If we don't, the consequences will be so severe that Earth will become uninhabitable. That's why the book is titled The Uninhabitable Earth. And so, prestigious publications like the New York Times, The Economist, and Time magazine recognize this book as the best book of the year. Yet anti-cultists stay silent. They don't write a single word. But the moment ALLATRA highlights the seriousness of the climate crisis, presents a scientifically backed report with research and data, suddenly we're labeled as an apocalyptic cult anticipating the end of the world. Isn't that an incredible paradox? A blatant double standard. When the UN warns about it, anti-cultists stay silent. When various authors write books on the subject, nothing. But as soon as ALLATRA speaks up, instantly, we're an apocalyptic cult. So I'm genuinely curious, do anti-cultists also consider every other renowned scientific institution warning about the seriousness of the situation to be an apocalyptic cult?
Honestly, with their approach, I wouldn't even be surprised if they labeled them an apocalyptic cult, because they're capable of it. We've already seen them label entire countries, or even continents, as apocalyptic cults.
Well, we already know by now that they deliberately withhold important information and only say what suits their agenda. Meanwhile, we operate in a way where we don't need grants. We do everything ourselves. We don't need any outside funding or influence, unlike certain editorial teams with dubious sources of financing that slander us.
And they also claim that we're fear-mongering just to recruit new members or new followers. Come on, what new members? We don't need any new members, and we don't need your money. Sure, intelligent people with common sense can help. But why would anyone need to join us? Do you have the information? Good. Or verify it for yourself and then take action. We're not a political party. We're not a religion. So we don't need any new members. And the world? Yes, the world needs smart, active people who are capable of verifying information and who want to save their own lives. But it certainly doesn't need chatterboxes and armchair philosophers. We are speaking out because we have hope. Hope that someone competent, someone wise will hear us, grasp the full gravity of the situation, and want to change it. The more we speak, the greater the chance that such people will emerge. And the more people who speak out, the higher those chances become.
Exactly. This is what we as participants of ALLATRA do. We analyze information, study the climate, observe and monitor current climate events from around the world. We bring you these reports, informing society and the public, because we consider it extremely important for people to know the truth, to understand what is happening to our planet right now, and most importantly, to be able to prepare for these climate situations. And for those who don't believe, go ahead. Ask those who have witnessed climate disasters firsthand and managed to survive.
These people already understand what truly matters. They have a very clear grasp of what the term climate change means. They also understand very clearly how crucial neighborly help can be because
they have experienced it firsthand.
Because they have lived through it themselves. and we pass on their experiences to others. We warn people that it is extremely important to learn and gather information on how to respond correctly in various extreme situations. Because when a person has that understanding, when they have that knowledge, it allows them to remain calm and avoid panic, meaning they can truly save their own life, as well as the lives of their family and loved ones. No matter how hard rescue services try, they simply may not be able to arrive immediately. The situation may be such that it's just not possible. That's why people must be prepared. They need to know what to do in those critical moments. And the situation around the world shows that even in developed countries with top-tier emergency services and the best technology, this remains the most fundamental factor: help from the people around you at that crucial moment.
At the same time, it's not the fault of emergency services or the government. It's not as if they don't want to help. The problem is that these disasters are becoming harder to predict. No one ever knows exactly where or when something will happen. Moreover, the first moments after a disaster are the most critical, and sending in more people right away could mean sending them to their deaths. That's why it's important to acknowledge this harsh reality and be prepared. Every person should know about an emergency go bag. They should know what it contains and have it ready at all times. Ideally, they should carry it with them whenever possible. If you travel by car, keep it in your vehicle, because you never know when or where disaster might strike. This go bag can help you survive the first 3 days, which are usually the most critical. Based on experience, we see that it typically takes about 3 days for the first responders to arrive.
And the truth is, if we can get this information out to the public, it has the real potential to save a tremendous number of lives. Every person should also share it with their neighbors. Because in a crisis, that neighbor might be the one who ends up saving you or your children.
That's exactly why it's so important for this information to be heard from all sides. Climate issues must become the #1 topic all around the world. It's crucial for politicians to hear this as well, because they are the ones who have the authority to implement changes that could save our lives. You see, without public demand, without people actively pushing for action, we end up in these ridiculous situations. Imagine this. We go to someone in a position of authority, explain the situation to them, and they respond, "Well, to solve your problem, you need to do this and that." And then they send you off to talk to someone else. Our problem? Seriously, what our problem? Don't you live on this planet too? We're talking about a global issue that affects all of humanity and must be solved globally. This is about the survival of every single one of us. Does it not concern you? Does it not concern your children, your family? We need to realize that ALLATRA consists of volunteers who are spreading information about what is truly happening and proposing possible solutions. But none of us individually have the power to solve this crisis alone. So when people comment on social media saying, "Well, go and fix it. All you do is talk," that's completely missing the point, because we are simply informing you about something that also affects you as well. You need to understand that. It's in your best interest to share this information further, to save their own lives. Fortunately, there are wise people who understand this. We've already spoken with some of them. We know there are many who genuinely want to solve this crisis. And thank God for them. But then there are those who seem completely detached from reality. Perhaps they live on another planet.
And if I may add something, just as you already mentioned, the need for this to be heard from all sides. I was really impressed that on February 20th, an article was published on aktualne.cz titled, "Something is happening in the Earth's core. The North Magnetic Pole is accelerating its movement." And the point here is that if journalists, media outlets, and different publications wrote more articles like this, if this information truly echoed from all sides, if people were aware of what is happening to the planet, then we could actually solve this issue incredibly fast. It all boils down to a simple question. Is society addressing this problem or ignoring it? Is there a dialogue happening or not? Is this information making it into the media, or is it just being replaced by mindless ramblings of anti-cultists claiming that some cultists are fear-mongering about the end of the world? So really, when even Aktualne news portal wrote about it, or for example, even Seznam Správy published an article on February 11th stating, "Scientists described how the edges of the Earth's inner core are deforming by up to 100 meters in some areas. These changes may be related to fluid movement in the outer core." Then we can see that the information is out there. It's just not reaching the people. It's simply not being discussed on a societal level. And if it's not being discussed, then we have no choice but to prepare our emergency go bags, something we need to do regardless. But it would be so much better if real action were taken, so that maybe we wouldn't even have to use them, so that we could slow down this climate progression.
So next time you hear or read an article, watch a news report referencing so-called religious studies experts, or come across some influencer video discussing our movement, ALLATRA, without addressing the climate situation or providing any relevant information about what we actually do. You can be certain that these are people funded by Dvorkin's sect, and they have nothing to do with us. What they study are certain subversive groups that they themselves create and then attempt to infiltrate us with, trying to destroy us one way or another. It's important to remember this, because the fact that we want to live, and we are speaking about it, that is not a crime. So I believe this is something logical and clear to any person on this planet.
Not only is it not a crime, it's our right.
We are not giving up. We keep moving forward. We stay true to our course and will continue informing people in society to the very end. The only thing ALLATRA cares about is for humanity to survive, so that we, as people, can live, see our children grow up, and ensure a future for their children and the generations to come. This is our motivation and the goal that drives us forward every single day. ALLATRA has always emphasized that human life is of the most important value. ALLATRA stands for the life of every person on this planet, and everything else being spread about us. Those are just fabricated lies by Dvorkin and his sect.